Alright guys, so in this video we're taking a look at the Insta360 One X2. This is the latest and greatest 360 camera from Insta360. And I did a video review a while back, a few months ago, on the Insta360 One R, which is basically a modular camera that has a 360 module here with the two lenses and also a 4K module. And I'll talk about the comparisons here in a little bit, and mostly what's going to be relevant to you guys, my audience, as to what's different and why you might want to get this, and maybe why you might want to pass on this one. So this is the second version of the One X. The first version, of course, was a while back. I think it came out more than a year ago, and I never reviewed that one. Essentially, the major differences between this one and the older version is it's got a higher, I think it's got better video quality. It's got more features. It does include this touchscreen here in the front. It's a little bit bigger, has a bigger battery, so it's got better battery life. And it's also waterproof, and it's got the tripod mount on the bottom here. Very similar form factor to the original version, but just improved overall. Now, if you're wondering about the image quality of this one compared to the One R, I think this one's a little bit better than the One R in terms of the 360 footage. So basically the One X is like the worst, and then the One R, which came later, is improved over that, and then the One X2 image quality is improved over the One R. So I think as they improve their software in the cameras over time in the firmware, it does get marginally better with each iteration of the hardware and software. Now, when you just look at the camera image the footage, if you convert it to 4K, because in 360 mode it's a 5.7K video, and you convert it to 4K video when you export it. If you just look at the 4K video at the highest bit rate, GoPro basically 7, 8, or 9 footage is going to look better. It doesn't have as much contrast and saturation, and not as over sharpened. I think one Insta360 footage tends to be more for people that don't want to do any sort of video editing or post-processing. They just want to export the video to Instagram or Facebook and just share it on social media. And for something like that, those kind of purposes, 1080p resolution, 720p resolution, this is totally fine for that. But if you're looking for high quality 4K footage, obviously 4K footage from the GoPros are going to look a little bit better than this. And I think that from all the reviews I've seen out there, I think that most people would tend to agree with that. Now, this camera's been highly reviewed already, and I just wanted to take a look at this and see how useful this would be for my audience in terms of how it would be useful for FPV. So I did do some, so I did try to sort of use this camera in certain scenarios that might be useful for you guys, not necessarily for primary footage, but for like B-roll, supplemental footage. I did a video where I showed drones like circling around the camera, for example. If you want to like capture that kind of footage, or a virtual cameraman type of footage, like if you want to use that as a virtual cameraman, that's one way of using it. And then I used it a couple of times with basically in third-person view, where you can put it on like a RC truck and basically get like a third-person perspective of the truck. It kind of looks like Mario Kart. I thought that was kind of useful. Also put it on a large 7-inch drone, a Camera 7, also capturing footage in that third-person view. And also, because it is a 360 camera, you can capture the forward view and the rear view. So if you if you happen to put this on a drone and are doing something like drone chasing, could be useful in that scenario where you're actually capturing both the forward view and the backward view, and you can capture drone chasing you in both perspectives. So that can be kind of useful for something like this. But of course, but again, you can also do that with the One R camera with slightly less image quality than the One X2. So it is something to keep in mind. Now, obviously, the big thing about the One R was using the cameras in like the 360 drones, like the X-Night 360. I think I used it on the Stealth 360. Basically, you put this on a drone and the drone becomes invisible if the drone is configured in a certain way. And for the 1X2, you can also do that as well. Perhaps you can also get rid of the battery to save some weight. It does run off of USB-C, so you can operate it in the same way as the 1R. But you do have to look at and consider the profile of the cameras. So for those of you who don't know what 360 cameras are, basically there's one camera on one side and another camera on the opposite side with 180-degree lenses on both sides. So you're capturing basically a 180-degree sphere on one side and also a 180-degree sphere on the other side. And then through the magic of software, they combine the two images to make a 360 video. But if you look at the profile of the 1R versus the 1X2, you can see that the 1R is quite a bit taller, and that allows for if you're going to be using it in the invisible drone scenario, basically it allows for the props and the motors to not show up in the video. Now I haven't tried the 1X2 in that same scenario because currently there's no drone frame that will hold this, but I'm thinking because of the thinner profile, the lenses being closer together, there's more of a chance of the props or the motor showing up in the video, so I'm thinking that the 1X2 is probably not going to be useful for using it in the invisible drone scenario. So if you're considering that, I know, of course I haven't tested it yet, but I'm thinking because of basically it looks like several millimeters, maybe as much as, I haven't actually measured it, but it could be as much as a centimeter of difference in terms of height, which means I'm pretty sure that the motors and props are going to show up in the video if you're using this in an invisible drone scenario, unless you're using like super thin motors and frame. But it's going to be on a smaller drone, and of course this is fairly hefty. So even if you get rid of the battery, it's going to be pretty heavy. So let me just show you how much this weighs here. This is just the camera itself with the battery. It's already 150 grams, 51 grams, but the 1R is quite a bit less at about 118 grams. So of course, if you get rid of the battery, things could be a little bit different. So we'll just eject the battery here. And now we're at 108.5 grams without the battery. But if we do the same on the 1R, so if you don't use the battery on the invisible drones, it's coming down at 84.8 grams. So again, the advantage here for the invisible drones, lesser weight, especially if you're putting on a drone, you're going to probably want to go with the 1R over the 1X2. So obviously there's a lot of other applications you can use for other than FPV drones. There's a ton of examples of how this can be creatively used, and they're shown on the Insta360 Instagram page. So if you want to check out their Instagram, they do have a lot of kind of interesting examples where you can use basically either the phone app or the desktop app to basically create your own fancy 360 videos. And there's the nice thing about the Insta360 sort of ecosystem is as each iteration of their software advances, they add new features and things that perhaps you haven't considered using it for in the past. A new feature might come out in either their smartphone app or their desktop program that allows you to create more interesting kind of videos that you weren't able to do before. So that's kind of one advantage of the Insta360 world, is that they are very creative in terms of updating their programs and firmware and stuff basically continuously. So, if there's something that you want to see from this camera that you haven't seen before that might be useful for FPV drones, you may want to leave a comment down in the comment section. And if there's something that, catches my attention, I'll be sure to pass that information along to them. And who knows, they may incorporate that into a future firmware update or software release, and you might have a nice new feature for you guys that could be useful down the road. So you never know. Anyway, so overall, I think it's a nice upgrade compared to the older 1X. If you compare the footage, it's definitely better than before. But for our particular purposes in the FPV world, if you already have the 1R, there's probably no reason for you to upgrade to the 1X2, because basically you have all the same features that you're going to want. Plus it's a lot lighter and it's going to be more useful for drones. Also, if you already have the 1R, then again, it doesn't, goes without saying that there's kind of no reason to get the 1X2 unless there's something very specific that you want to use the 1X2 for that you can't use on the 1R. However, outside of FPV drones, it's a pretty useful tool to have if you want to get basically more B-roll and supplemental footage to enhance your story and whatever kind of video you're trying to produce, because it does capture angles and footage that you can't capture with normal cameras. Granted, it is not as higher quality as a GoPro or some other higher end cameras, but for the purposes of 360 video, I think this one here, as far as I know, is probably the best one to get. There's the GoPro Hero, I think it's the Hero Max. I've seen some footage of that. It's about the same as this, but the tools, the workflow, the applications, the features just aren't up to par compared to the Insta360 ecosystem. So if you're considering this over the GoPro 360 camera, definitely get this one over the GoPro. I think that this one's definitely going to give you a little bit more value overall, and especially down the road as they add more features and updates, which they are constantly doing. I think that is the ultimate value in the Insta360 ecosystem. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video useful, and hopefully will help you make a good decision as to which camera to get and which one might be useful for your particular work. If you did find the video helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Let me know if you've got any questions, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.